It was October 31, 1984, at 3:30 p.m., and 10 restaurants in the Dalles, Oregon, were filled with families enjoying their Thanksgiving holiday dinner, when chaos erupted. 751 people were about to fall ill due to a deliberate act of bioterrorism. The contaminated salad bars, laced with salmonella, became the catalyst for one of the most heinous crimes in U.S. history. Panic set in as people began to exhibit severe symptoms of food poisoning. What seemed like a typical family gathering would soon turn into a nightmare. The scene inside the restaurants was one of pandemonium as people realized they had been poisoned. Frightened families rushed to seek medical attention, while restaurant staff were at a loss for what was happening. The smell of vomit and disinfectant filled the air as healthcare workers rushed to contain the outbreak. The usually bustling atmosphere was now a frantic scene of chaos and confusion. Emergency personnel were soon on the scene, scrambling to keep up with the sheer number of patients. At the center of this catastrophe was a group of cult-like followers of Rajneesh, a spiritual leader who had been recruiting members since the 1970s. Among them was Ma Anand Sheila, a key figure in this bioterrorist attack. Sheila, a charismatic and ruthless leader, orchestrated this attack in an attempt to sway the local elections in favor of her group. With a calculated coldness, she orchestrated the poisoning, leaving a trail of suffering in her wake. Sheila's actions would shock the nation and leave a lasting impact on the fight against bioterrorism. Witnesses described the scene as absolute pandemonium and a disaster waiting to happen. Some claimed to have seen staff at the restaurants nervously laughing, while others recalled hearing strange chanting and singing emanating from a nearby building. Many reported feeling unwell shortly after consuming the tainted salad bars, with some experiencing severe stomach cramps, diarrhea, and vomiting. As the situation spiraled out of control, authorities scrambled to identify the source of the outbreak. The question on everyone's mind was, who would be responsible for this heinous crime? Before we go further, hit subscribe and the bell. We post new cases every single day. Let me take you back to the very beginning of this story. In the 1970s, Bhagwan Shree Rajneesh, a charismatic spiritual leader, began recruiting followers worldwide. His message of love, acceptance, and spiritual enlightenment resonated with many, attracting a diverse group of individuals. They settled in a vast ranch in Oregon, creating an intentional community known as Rajneeshpuram. This utopian settlement was meant to be a safe haven for free thinkers, but it soon turned into a totalitarian regime, governed by Ma Anand Sheila and her allies. Their grip on power would lead them to commit one of the most sinister acts in U.S. history. As we delve deeper into this twisted tale, you'll learn about the complex web of power struggles and manipulation that led to this bioterrorist attack. You'll meet the key players, from the charismatic leader Rajneesh to the ruthless Ma Anand Sheila, and discover the intricacies of their twisted ideology. With each passing minute, the events unfolding in the Dalles, Oregon, will become increasingly disturbing, and the full extent of the Rajneesh movement's sinister plans will become clear. In 1984, Ma Anand Sheila, born Sheila Purna Rajneesh, was the central figure in the Rajneesh bioterror attack. Ma Anand Sheila was 31 years old at the time, an Indian woman who had moved to Oregon to join the followers of Bhagwan Shree Rajneesh. She had risen to power within the Rajneeshpuram community and was seen as a strong leader. Ma Anand Sheila was known for her intelligence, her charisma, and her ambition. Along with her partner and fellow Rajneesh follower Stephen P. Wasserman, Ma Anand Sheila was determined to ensure Rajneeshpuram's influence in local politics. Ma Anand Sheila's daily life was one of leadership within Rajneeshpuram, the intentional community she called home. As the personal secretary to Bhagwan Shree Rajneesh, she was deeply involved in the community's day-to-day operations and was known for her efficient manner. Ma Anand Sheila was said to have a complex personality, having a sharp mind and strong will but also a cold and detached demeanor. Despite her strict adherence to the Rajneesh doctrine, Ma Anand Sheila was known to form close relationships with a select few within the community. In public appearances, however, Ma-Anand Sheela was often described as stern and imposing. Ma-Anand Sheela's likable qualities were those of a strong and capable leader, earning her a certain respect within the Rajneeshpuram community. Despite her strict adherence to doctrine, she was known to offer spiritual guidance and support to her followers. Her charisma and intelligence won her many allies, and she proved to be a skilled politician within the community. Ma-Anand Sheela was also known for her unwavering commitment to the cause, never backing down from a challenge. However, her cold demeanor and strict control over those within the community often made her seem unapproachable. Within the Rajneeshpuram community, Ma-Anand Sheela was trusted and respected by her followers. She had a tight-knit group of allies and close friends, many of whom were also prominent members of the community. However, it is unclear how much Bhagwan Shree Rajneesh himself trusted her, as his devotion to her was often called into question. Despite the doubts surrounding his level of trust in Ma-Anand Sheela, she seemed to have a free hand in managing the community's operations. But how far would Ma-Anand Sheela go to ensure the Rajneeshpuram community's influence in local politics? In the months leading up to the 1984 Wasco County elections, Ma-Anand Sheela and her fellow Rajneesh followers became increasingly desperate to gain control over the county. Tensions within the community began to rise, and some began to question the morality of their actions. As the election drew near, Ma-Anand Sheela and her supporters grew more agitated, knowing that their influence in the county was at stake. The pressure was mounting, and Ma-Anand Sheela's resolve began to harden. Would she stop at anything to ensure the Rajneeshpuram community's victory? Concerns over the Rajneeshpuram community's growing influence in local politics began to surface in the spring of 1984. Many residents of the Dalles were wary of the community's rapid expansion and the influx of new residents who seemed to be disrupting the quiet town's way of life. Some even reported receiving threatening letters from the Rajneesh followers, warning them to stay out of the community's affairs. However, these warning signs were largely ignored, and the community's activities continued unabated. Meanwhile, Ma-Anand Sheela and her cohorts were secretly planning their most sinister move yet. But who noticed the subtle changes in Ma-Anand Sheela's behavior that spring? Who was ignored by the authorities and the community at large? One thing was certain: the seeds of the bioterror attack had been sown, and the consequences would be devastating. As the summer of 1984 approached, the residents of the Dalles were blissfully unaware of the horrors that lay ahead. Would anyone have been able to stop Ma-Anand Sheela in time, or was it too late to prevent the impending disaster? The trail of evidence that would eventually uncover the truth was about to begin. In the scorching summer of 1984, the sun beat down on the town of the Dalles, Oregon, where 751 people would soon fall ill from a sinister plot. It was late afternoon on September 9, when residents began to report symptoms of food poisoning, complaining of stomach cramps, vomiting, and diarrhea. The local restaurants were bustling with patrons enjoying the warm evening, unaware of the biological agents that had been deliberately introduced into their salad bars. The air was alive with the sounds of laughter and conversation, a far cry from the chaos that was brewing. As nightfall approached, the townspeople would soon realize that something was amiss. It was just months prior, in 1981, that several thousand followers of Rajneesh had settled onto the Big Muddy Ranch, which they would later rename Rajneeshpuram. The followers, under the leadership of Ma-Anand Sheela, had been secretly stockpiling salmonella bacteria in a hidden laboratory, awaiting the perfect moment to strike. As the 1984 Wasco County elections loomed, the followers feared that they would not gain enough votes to secure their control over the county. Desperation led to a plan to incapacitate the voting population, and thus the seeds of the bioterrorist attack were sown. The Rajneesh followers had been secretly training in the art of biological warfare, and their plans were now put into action. On that fateful day, the followers deliberately contaminated the salad bars and glasses of water at 10 local restaurants in the Dalles, using the salmonella bacteria to spread their sinister plot. The contaminant was first delivered to 2 county commissioners, who were subsequently poisoned, as a warning and to test the effectiveness of the bacteria. The bacteria then made its way into the salad bars, where it was added to the salad dressing, making it nearly impossible to avoid contamination. The unsuspecting patrons were exposed to the bacteria, which would go on to sicken 751 people, with 45 being hospitalized. As the days passed, the townspeople struggled to cope with the sudden outbreak of illness. The most shocking detail of this heinous crime is that the Rajneesh followers used glasses of water to poison the county commissioners, who were later joined by an additional 751 innocent victims. This deliberate act of poisoning sent a chilling message to the people of the Dalles, and it was a stark reminder of the extent to which the followers would go to achieve their twisted goals. It's a harrowing thought to consider that these innocent people were intentionally targeted and poisoned, all in an effort to gain control of the Wasco County Circuit Court. The sheer scale of this bioterrorist attack would go down in history as one of the largest and most sinister in U.S. history. Initially, the Oregon Health Authority and the Centers for Disease Control led the investigation, gathering information and conducting interviews, but their initial findings were inconclusive, unable to determine the cause of the outbreak. They couldn't pinpoint the source of the salmonella, leaving the possibility of accidental contamination still on the table. Further investigation revealed a suspicious pattern, with multiple victims reporting eating at the same local restaurants before falling ill. Investigators found no evidence of a large-scale outbreak in the area preceding the attack in the Dalles, making mass contamination seem unlikely. This lack of evidence led authorities to speculate that something more sinister was at play. A year after the incident, on February 28, 1985, the investigation took a significant turn with the discovery of the key piece of evidence that would change everything. A sample of salmonella bacteria found in a Rajneeshee medical laboratory matched the contaminant that had sickened the town residents. This breakthrough led authorities to re-examine the Rajneeshee community with fresh eyes, looking for any links to the contamination. The FBI was brought in to assist in the investigation, poring over records and interviewing key members of the community. Meanwhile, the initial investigation's findings were re-evaluated, and it became clear that accidental contamination was now a remote possibility. This new evidence marked a major shift in the case, pointing the finger at the Rajneeshee community. Rajneesh himself had many followers, but investigators focused on several prominent leaders who stood out as potential suspects, the Rajneeshee officials who led the community and had the means to carry out such an attack. Anand Sheila, the leader of the group, was a high-ranking member who had access to the medical lab and connections to the local restaurants. Other possible co-conspirators included several Rajneeshee officials who stood to gain from the community's influence over the local government. These individuals seemed to have both motive and opportunity, making them prime suspects in the investigation. As investigators dug deeper, they found evidence of potential motives for the attack. One of the earliest leads investigators pursued was an unrelated crime committed by a man who lived in the nearby town, but the connection turned out to be a red herring and wasted months of investigation. The man was found to have a similar type of bacteria, but after further testing, it was discovered that his case was unrelated to the outbreak in the Dalles. This dead end led investigators on a wild goose chase, keeping them from focusing on more promising leads while the real perpetrators continued to operate under the radar. When the investigators finally realized their mistake, they scrambled to get back on track, making up for lost time as they continued to dig through evidence. Meanwhile, the Rajneeshee community kept their secrets, and the masterminds behind the attack stayed free, for now. One of the most shocking twists in this bioterror attack case is the involvement of Rajneesh himself. The man who preached nonviolence and love was also the